There you go. Greetings, everyone. This is the Unify meeting. We're at, I was going to say January, but we're not January anymore. I'm lost here. May 6th. What a strange, strange concept that we're actually, no, not May, April 6th. Start over again. Thank you very much.
My God, I thought I'd lost a month. It's flying by too fast this time, thing as it is.
Yeah, we've been invited to participate in the National Council on Pharmacies, NCPDP, in May. So I've been thinking all morning around May time frames and get my calendars all messed up here. So so let's get started here. Welcome everybody. Good to see you all here. I know we missed last week and we've got another call scheduled next week. So we'll just do some brief introductions and then any announcements, and then we'll dive into the two topics. We have two topics. One is talking about so the NEEM OASIS work, and Catherine Escobar has agreed to join us, which is great. And then we were going to reprise the conversation we were having yesterday with the Health Data Palooza at their annual conference. And Pooja, Mary, and I presented at that. We thought we would sort of revisit some of that and some late breaking good news or some good interesting things happening there. So so this is the time where we identify anybody new on the call. And I think the only one might be Connor. I'm wondering, Connor, have you joined us before?
I've sat in, I think on one or two sessions, but I'm rejoining. And hi, everyone, I'm Connor Johnson. I'm a model of care coordinator with Hennepin County. The model of care being a housing and health integration model of care to really best serve patients experiencing homelessness and housing instability in our healthcare systems. And we are really pushing to be part of, working with SSCI and doing, pilot project, hopefully around universal consent, informed consent for the patients as part of this model. So hopefully we're getting leadership approval, lots of stuff on kind of our back end at Hennepin County, but I'm rejoining this group to, stay informed. So thanks for having me.
Thanks, welcome. Appreciate your participation. We're excited about being able to work with you guys on that. A lot of interest in that area. I think everyone else has been here before. So Brian, any notes that you want to share with us here?
Sure. I was hoping to, throw some of this in the direction of Eric or Paul or Greg or anyone else, but I guess it's just me today. So on the National Science Foundation Open Knowledge Network work, there are meetings moving forward on the NEEM ontology work, as well as I'm going to schedule one follow-up meeting for the consent services project for this OKN world, and for the decarceration reunification work. We have a check-in meeting for the 19th of April, I believe. So a couple of weeks away. We're continuing to work the definition of these use cases for preparation for NSF to do their budgeting over the summer. So we're crossing our fingers and hoping that some of this work can end up getting funded by the National Science Foundation. And for ICSFIS, the Direct Trust Information Exchange for Human Services consensus body, we've just had our very first subgroup meeting for the resource discovery group being led by Greg Bloom. We're about to have a meeting tomorrow for the, well, I'm calling it the Social Care Information Exchange subgroup. It has a very long name that could only have been defined by committee of individual, family, household, social care subgroup, which doesn't actually say what we're doing at all. However, I embrace the wisdom of the masses. That is what we're going to, what it's named. We're going to be working on, in that group, on what protocols do we need to define in order to enable, for instance, referrals to social care organizations. human services organizations. I'm hoping that, in fact, we won't be defining anything new, since we already have a few of these standards working their way through HL7 and IHE for 360 for closed loop referrals, but rather make contributions into them for things that can be done to simplify them for the smallest of the CBOs out there. So that's what's going on there. We have a full consensus body meeting on, I believe it is April 13th. Yep, right in the middle of the ONC annual meeting next week. For that, I'm expecting that we will be giving an overview on HL7. One of our goals is to educate the healthcare professionals, the healthcare IT professionals that are participating in ICFIS on social care standards like open referral, 211 LA, et cetera. At the same time, we also need to train up the human services folks on what's been done so far over the last 20 years in health IT standards, so that we can all be more productive in defining standards that will work for interoperability between healthcare and human service. So next week at the ICFIS meeting, we'll do a quick introduction to HL7, and I've already been clued in on a whole bunch of other material that HL7 will let us share for free with the ICFIS community, and so I'm thrilled about that. So if anybody's interested in participating in ICFIS, let me know, or for that matter, the OKN, the Open Knowledge Network work that we're doing with the National Science Foundation. I'm done. Thank you.
Thanks, Brian. Thanks. You can always just put a note in the chat or send it to Amanda to find out more about that. And there's some work on the NIC site. Stefan, if I put you on the spot here for a second, do you want to just say a word about the ONC meeting next week? So I'm not sure everyone's familiar with it.
Yeah, as far as the annual meeting goes, yeah, we're excited this year. We split the annual meeting. You know, typically would have that. We've even had it as early as December, sometimes in January or February. This year, we decided to split it. We had some kind of pre-events in February, and then we split for the main programming of the event. We had to push back to April. We did that for a number of different reasons, but nonetheless, it's some great programming. I think you're going to see a thread around social determinants of health, a thread around diversity, equity, health equity by design, as Mickey likes to call it, in many of the different sessions and hitting it from a lot of different angles. Some great presenters and speakers, as we always try to do. So highly encourage you to register for that and spend as much time as you can catching it live. And I believe we're going to be doing our best to have recordings of it afterwards for those who miss it. So still a good idea to register just in case you can't attend it live, because then you should get the follow-up links with details to it being posted and whatnot. So again, we're extremely excited. We know some of you have participated in the past and might even be involved in this one, because I know we've got a great group here. So if you've been to one before, you know what they're about, and hopefully we'll get back to in-person someday, maybe next year. Right now, I think we're still planning to have our tech forum, which is an August timeframe, August, September this year, maybe. I think we're planning that to be virtual as of right now as well, but maybe next year we'll be ready for putting it back to a in person, or at least a hybrid. So thank you for that, Daniel.
Can you share who the plenary session speaker will be?
So there's, I actually have to check and see. I know of one big name that we're excited about, one of the big speakers on the government side, the political side, but I have to verify that it's been approved and that it's finalized. You know how it goes until they announce it. I don't think they've announced it yet publicly, but political, type of appointment, that we're excited about. We have a couple of them, other, policymakers that are sprinkled in throughout the days. So in the usual cast of characters on the ONC side and another kind of interoperability side, but yeah, I don't, unless I go back and verify that it's actually been announced. I don't think it was in the clips this week yet. So, or in the newsletter we put out. So I don't think it might be announced. It might be announced, through Twitter and stuff, and then reinforced next week. But
I was just curious because we'd had a discussion. I won't say debate. It wasn't that serious, but about whether we should cancel or reschedule the ICFIS meeting, which is happening at noon to 1 next Wednesday. And I looked at the agenda and said, well, you know, we're going to miss a half an hour worth of whoever the plenary speaker is. I feel bad about that. Maybe they'll record it.
Yeah. So
maybe
I
we'll
believe
have
the
a
plan is,
designated ONC watcher to kind of give us
there you
text
go.
reports on what's being done. while we're in
I'm
the
a
meeting.
little biased in a good way, where of course I would probably say, yeah, you know, remove the other meeting. Ours is much more important. But
Of course it is.
I think that's what I'm supposed to say. If you ask our comms team and our events team, that they want us to say, no, attend us. You know, we're more important. No, but seriously though, obviously that's part of the reason why we try to record these things and post them later, because we know there's so many. I mean, part of the benefit is that people have been able to participate and do more events, but there's also been more events, and people sometimes that are running these events don't try to coordinate them as much, because they know, hey, you know, things are getting recorded and reposted, and you can hop from an event to event because you're just doing it virtually. So by all means, we completely understand if you guys miss it, and you know, if it's, you know, the plenary, you can expect that to be recorded and posted later. You know, I believe that's where we're at right now, barring any technical glitches.
Well, thank you for understanding. We are not dissing ONC by continuing to hold our meeting.
No worries. We know there's important work to be done, and we don't want to disrupt that either. So
we'll have a designated ONC lookout sitting there in the meeting, giving play-by-play back to the group.
We just wanted some breaking news we could put on the site, you know.
I don't internally, I think we've gotten some good news. I just don't know if that's been shared publicly yet.
That's fine. But I'm sure we'll hear about it, and hopefully get a chance to talk with you and other folks about it as we go forward here.
Great.
So thanks for that. And I know we'll be, you know, one of the things we'll be talking about, I know you have to jump off later, but one of the things we're going to be talking about after Catherine gives us the update on NEEM and OASIS is the presentation that Pooja and Mary and I did yesterday at Health Data Palooza, and how that's kind of leading into a series of presentations and discussions around consent. And, you know, we've started a discussion around an ONC event later in the springtime sometime. So I'm looking to this group in particular as, you know, a lot of the thinking power and experience that we're gonna be able to bring to that planning approach. So we should, you know, so take full advantage of the folks who are on the call and how we'll be able to design that going forward. So
Daniel, just one thing on that, Stefan, I noticed there is a presentation like for e-consent and SDOH. So I was just literally going through the agenda.
Oh, good.
I think, yeah, so I can post that here, but it looked like that was Wednesday too, maybe, I think. But
yeah, and I think we've got a blog post coming out relating to that as well. So this is,
awesome.
I think it's related to one of our LEAP grantee awards.
Yeah, that's what it looked like.
With San Diego Health Connect. And so again, we've got a blog post coming out on that we're trying to get out, hopefully Monday, I think is, you know, fingers crossed. So that way it can be referenced in the annual meeting as well. Like, and we've got this blog post that just came out too, so it all kind of ties together. But yeah, in you know, as Daniel referenced, we are, and I know it's mentioned to this group in the past, we are still actively, you know, working on planning a workshop on this topic. And we are planning that for this summer. We just had a call with Daniel, kind of a deep dive. We've been doing a number of others. Just got off another one with MDIC, a medical device and innovation course. Actually, that was on a different workshop. A lot of workshops going in the works. That one's on digital therapeutics, if you're interested in that topic. But anyhow, no, we've had a lot of these calls, and Pooja, I know we're meeting with you and POCP team and a number of others, and that we know there's a lot of others on this call who've been sharing that input, and you know, Daniel and others have been carrying forward all of that input into some of these conversations. But we're just like flushing out kind of what we want the scope of it to be around, and then there'll be additional opportunity to kind of you know, promote that and secure speakers and all of that kind of thing. But yeah, we're still planning for that to happen this summer.
Thanks, Stefan. Yeah, a lot of stuff going on. No moss is growing under your feet over there. Somehow I think it was a little easier when it was in person, because you just can't.
You can only do so much.
Yeah, right. Got to order the bagels and coffee. Somebody's got to do that. So back to those days, as it were.
And I do apologize. I have to drop, like I said, in about 8 minutes. And I'll try to come back at 4 my time, 4 o'clock. Because I know you still have a half hour left on there. So if I can make it back and that call doesn't run late, I will.
Okay. Well, we'll probably be here. See if we get into 2 or 3 overtimes today. But maybe not.
Oh, today I got karate practice. I got to take the kids to karate practice. So I can do up to 4:30 my time, but then I have to get in the kid in the car, take the minivan, take the kids to the karate practice, pulling daddy duty.
Excellent.
You're a good dad.
I try to chip in where I can.
So with that, I want to invite Catherine. I have your slides. Do you want to show your own? You want me to show them, Catherine?
If you want to show them, that's fine, or whatever you're more comfortable with.
If they're helpful to you, I'll put them up. I know that you've got some, want to really update folks on that. Brian's been doing a good job kind of carrying the water, so to speak, on that. But, a lot of stuff going on the NEAM side, and especially, as we're looking at connecting to the HL7 and, the other, educational standards and things like that. It's really a good time to kind of keep those sort of top of mind as we move forward there. So I'll go ahead and put this up, and why don't you do a quick intro, and then we just kind of run through some of them and kind of the key points that you want to share with us on that would be super.
All right. So thank you. There's a few folks here. I don't think that we've met before. I'm Catherine Escobar. I wear a couple of hats. My first is working DoD Joint Staff J6, and my second is as the NEAM Managing Director. I imagine most of you are familiar with NEAM, right now still being referred to as the National Information Exchange Model, but in the very near future will just be known as NEAM. And so why is that? And here's where we come to the slide part of our presentation. And that is because NEAM is making a move over the next 2 years to become an official OASIS open standard. And in doing that, we're going to drop the acronym and just go straight for NEAM. So anybody who remembers like the show Will and Grace, there was a character, his name was Jack, and he'd always do this intro, just Jack. And so now we're just gonna be NEAM. Anyway, so as we move out, we've had a few successes leading up to now as far as progress and where we're going. We pitched this idea. It took me about 1.5 years to get full concurrence, but we got it through all of the wickets between our business architecture committee, our technical architecture committee, and our executive steering committee. And so at our annual meeting last year, that was all approved to go forward and become part of the OASIS Open Standards Group. This is a little bit different than maybe what most of you might be familiar with their technical committee type way of doing business. This is a fairly new approach that they've launched a couple years ago, and so we're really honored to be part of it. It lines up very nicely with being able to sustain very closely the way NEAM has been used to doing business as far as working with open source and communities. In the technical steering committee, one of the limitations is in order to participate, you have to become a member of OASIS. With the open standard work, you don't have to do that. You don't have to become an OASIS member and that in order to contribute, because it's now open source. So that was one of the key reasons why we chose to go down this path. But that said, as we go down this path, it's going to be really important to get sponsors, because that's how the project will be supported financially. Again, a departure from the years past. And with that, DoD Joint Staff J6 has become the first sponsor of the NEAM OASIS project, and we are shepherding that process through. So all of that has been accomplished. So let's move to the next slide, if you please.
Sure.
All right, so what are we doing? What do we need to do? So we sat down, put a list of actions and milestones together. We've got that. We're following it pretty diligently. But three major things that we, in order to make this full transition, are necessary. The first is we're updating all of our governance and process documents to line up with how OASIS does business. As I said before, it's not a great departure from what the OASIS community, the NEAM community has been accustomed to, but it does need to be updated. The second is making sure that all of the assets that NEAM owns, so the model, the specifications, all of the intellectual capital gets transitioned over to OASIS formally and is made available. So what it looks like as we are kind of unwrapping all of this is that NEAM will become a family of standards. It won't just be like one standard, it'll be a family. And like each of the specifications will be a standard under that family. And I think that's really the smartest way to go versus just one big, standard that tries to accommodate everything. And then the last thing is how do we actually transfer? So many of you may be aware, all of these assets have been managed by our lead developer, GTRI. And so we have to formally move the digital aspects over to OASIS, and again, making them open source. So those are the three major milestones to make this fully transitioned. Next slide. We also have to work on a communication plan so that we're letting the world know to be that NEAM is becoming an open source project, and we are inviting everyone who has an interest in being part of the shaping of NEAM to be part of the sponsors list. Now, there is a cost to that, and I'll talk a little bit more in the next couple slides about how we're going to introduce that and do our outreach. But these are the last couple of things that we need to do for as we're working through becoming an official standard. So sponsorship, what does that mean? Many of you may recognize that our hierarchy currently in our org chart is we have the executive steering committee. And that is the group that leads and decides, defines the overall direction for NEAM. And that has largely been held by 4 agencies: DoD, DOJ, HHS, and DHS. With moving to OASIS, that ESC construct will become an advisory board. And now, as an open source standard or family of standards, NEAM needs sponsorship, and that sponsorship pays for managing, running the program, and additionally, the technical support that currently that again, in the past, each of the executive steering committee bodies would have funded. And so we are having a kickoff on this April 19th at 1 o'clock. If you have an interest, if your organization has an interest in becoming a sponsor of NEAM, I invite you to register for the event and learn about what that means. What are the advantages? How can you get involved? If you want to look at the new charter, the NEAM charter, and how it's presented, you will. We have published that, and it should be available at the link here. And Daniel, I have to believe you're sharing the slides. You're sending them out to everybody so that they can just click on those links. Okay, very good. So again, I offer that opportunity. And then our primary point of contact at OASIS regarding sponsorship is Dee Scher. So I've given you her email address, and I just ask if you're contacting her, just CC me so I know. And you know, we are in full communication, because we welcome everybody to become a sponsor of NEAM and hope that this will be a wild success. All right, next slide. So next steps, we've got a lot of these accomplished. As I mentioned before, Joint Staff J6 has become the first sponsor of the project. We've completed the charter. We've identified who's going to be on the transition team, those of us lucky enough to like write all those documents and do all that fun admin stuff, you know. and doing the meetings. And then the last thing is we're developing the repository for storing all that intellectual capital, if you will. So those are what's in our like 50-yard site right now. Next slide. So, and that brings us to the quick, any questions, thoughts, or comments? And I see I have a fan for J6.
Yes.
Yeah, it's that geeky XComs guy in me.
How's it going?
If I could ask one more geeky question, is there a tie between your work at J6 and like OUSD with regards to represented from an SDO standpoint?
There's lots of ties. I would tell you that with regards to specifically NEAM becoming a standard, not so much, but you know, all of the organizations that are federal, state, local, government, you know, DOD, etc. You know, there's been a push to consider NEAM, and so I know OUSD has in some parts of it, and like all of the organizations, just like as you're familiar with J6, it's so enormous. So you have pockets of programs who are working with NEAM, and then you have the rest of the organization that can't spell NEAM. So I would tell you, yes, there is. Specifically off the top of my head, unfortunately, I don't have that. But we do have some folks participating in NEAM and, you know, working down that path. You're on
I was
mute.
just wondering if it would translate to a DoD directive for mandatory implementation and other aspects as well too. So.
Well, yeah, and so, you know, I don't know if you maybe you don't know. There's a DODI 8320.07, right? Consider NEAM first. You know, we are working with ANS, who's planning to stand up a acquisition domain within NEAM. And now the new CDAO, because you know, that's causing a little bit of a pause, I guess, in some of the conversations, right? Because the new CDAO is getting up to speed and coming on board, where they we're somewhat waiting with bated breath until they are ready to have the conversation about, you know, strengthening the DODI policies, that sort of thing. But that said, you know, there's nowhere do we have any illusions that NEAM would be the only standard that should be used, because it's not all inclusive, right?
Right.
But it should be one of the standards that is fully recognized, especially where we're trying to be collaborative with other standards such as HL7. Brian and I are working together on the NSF stuff. We recognize that there's great value and strength in these standards working together versus trying to compete with one another, because so much of the conversation is lost in all of that.
Great, thank you, Catherine. Appreciate it.
Absolutely, thank you for the questions. Any other questions across the board?
Hey, Catherine, Mary Kratz here. Do you know if the DoD NetSyn project has looked at NEAM or is utilizing NEAM?
I don't know. If you could send me some information on it, I can do a little research, just a little blurb and you know, that, and I can look in on it.
I'll put the URL in the chat. Let me dig it up.
Okay. Yeah, so there's a question about the Eventbrite session. It is in the PowerPoint. It's on the slide just before this, so you should be able to copy and paste it once you get the slides. Other questions?
I have a question. I know Brian and I and a lot of the folks here have been talking about sort of that intersection between the standards bodies, between, you know, HL7 and NEAM, and then also, you know, with some of the educational standards, and then others. I don't know, Brian or Catherine, if there's any been any broader thinking about sort of convening that, those in some fashion to at least align efforts or be aware of them, because there's competition as the way of sort of erasing the collaborative spirit sometimes.
Well, and I would tell you that, and Brian can confirm this, is that, that's sort of the drum I keep beating, is that, especially with this ontology work, we see a real potential here for all of these various standards to work together. But yeah, there is work, and hopefully with like the NSF stuff, it will provide the funding to be able to make that more real. I've been talking so we stood up a learning and development domain last year with advanced distributed learning folks, and part of the content that they're bringing into NEAM is I think it's SEDS. I think that's the one for the education. And then of course, I know Brian has had a great history with trying to do some mapping between NEAM and HL7, and we have preserved that work. And so we're working on it. Absolutely. But it's an enormous task. Brian, you have additional?
Oh, I was just going to throw out that we have folks within HL7 and ICFIS who are working on mapping from open referral to FHIR. Within our ontology working group, we have folks that are looking at how do we map from FHIR to open referral to NEAM. And I also, in my back pocket, I'm looking at how do we then map to the Common Educational Data Standards, or the HUD's HMIS ontology, or what do we have, if anything, for a child welfare ontology? Once again, something we're standing up a working group to pull together subject matter experts from child welfare to help contribute to such an ontology. So there's a tremendous amount of work that we need to do in defining data models and ontologies and defining the mapping between all of them. Unfortunately, it's not work that can be done quickly, at least not if you want to get it right. So I fear it's going to still take us another year or 3 to get it all done. Having the NEAM ontology created, perhaps underwritten by NSF, would be a tremendous start to it all, because then we can use tools to match and map the ontologies themselves, comparing apples to apples instead of attempting to compare apples and oranges. Over, just for Catherine's sake.
Well, thank you. Questions?
Well, I think we'll obviously stay closely tuned to the work through the ontologies, and as the work proceeds with NSF, and hopefully that materializes, as well as the consent work, it seems like there'll be lots of opportunities in the future to really sort of have some very concrete places where we want to sort of apply this, especially as we look at use cases for data sharing across many of these different domains. Some of them will benefit from NEAM standards being instantiated there as well. So thank you, Catherine. And obviously this is a group that is closely tuned to the work, and Brian's done a great job sort of bringing and keeping us aware of things that are happening, and hopefully we'll be able to continue doing more of that as we go forward. So thanks for your good work and your persistence. I know it's been a long, hard slog to get to this place since we met a couple of years ago, but I'm glad to see that that's moving along there.
Well, thank you. Thank you for the invite to be able to share the update. And as we go forward, again, feel free to reach out anytime you want to do this again. Happy to do it.
Yep, that's great. Thanks so much for that. So want to pivot our sort of conversation to what I mentioned before, which was the conversation we were having, the presentation we were making yesterday to the Health Data Palooza, and Pooja served as our our moderator, facilitator, just did an outstandingly brilliant job. Mary and I try to keep pace with her in terms of being able to respond. It was very, I thought it was great. It was very interactive and discussion oriented, which was allowed us to really get into some of the details. I thought it was an appropriate timing to sort of reprise that a bit, kind of share what we were doing and kind of think a little bit about the kind of conversation we're having, because obviously we actually have another presentation tomorrow to the all-in community that's related to this. Catherine Miller, myself, and Chris Albatrani are presenting kind of a slightly different take on it. And then we have a meeting on Friday with the Data Funders Collaborative where we have a chance to sort of lay this out as well, which is great. And so, Mary, I don't know if you have that deck up. It might be good just kind of quickly walk through some of those slides. If you don't, maybe Pooja, you might.
Yeah, I was actually trying to see, we were going to post it on the Point of Care Partners website. I don't think it's there yet, so I can.
Mary's got it.
Yeah,
Oh,
I've got it,
perfect.
but I have about 15 more minutes.
Okay, great.
I might be able to rejoin, but Pooja, maybe it'd be better if you do the
want me to
share.
display it? Yep, absolutely.
Thank you.
All right, and then like I said, we will make sure that we get this out. Actually, I think she's going to post it now. So let me pull up. So yeah, as Daniel mentioned, we had put in a proposal to speak at Health Data Palooza, and it was a virtual session. And so we were all, I actually attended in person, but you know, the actual session we did on Zoom. It was primarily, you know, to kind of, well, for one thing, we wanted to make sure that we had a chance to share the results of the scan. I know so many folks on here were involved with that. And so, you know, we wanted to make sure we had a chance to do that, but then we also wanted to, let me just share this real quick. Let me know if you can see it.
Yeah.
Okay, so then we also just wanted to make sure that, you know, Mary and what they've been doing at the Interoperability Institute with the MELD Sandbox and the data, we had a chance to talk about that, but then really put it in the context of e-consent, since that was, you know, the title was Modernizing Consent to Advance Health and Equity. And so I just kind of did an initial level setting of, you know, when we talk about consent in healthcare, you know, kind of falls into 4 different categories, right? You've got the privacy issues, which, you know, are really covered under HIPAA. You got the medical treatment where you're at the bedside about to have a, you know, a procedure, or you're, you know, getting all your paperwork in. You've got the research side, which is the clinical trial space. And then there is the advanced care directives. We know there's work being done there under the PASSIO project and others as well. And so really kind of just laid out the fact that, you know, when you look at actual electronic consent as opposed to paper, you know, it's really the clinical trial space that has kind of set the stage, right? They've got portals, they've got apps, they've got things where, you know, patients are signing up really electronically on these platforms to give their consent. What's driving now kind of our conversations that we've been having here, folks are having other places, you know, results that kind of came out of the scan was, now that we're opening up patient data, now that we're talking about interoperability, now that we're connecting systems beyond just, you know, healthcare related ones, you know, patients can share their data with apps, right? You know, here we talk a lot about kind of community services. There's all these open questions now that are coming about around e-consent, which in, you know, fall into kind of legal, technical, ethical, and something that we're finding in our work is that despite information blocking rules and despite the CMS rules of patient and payer access or patient access, you know, there's a lot of concerns out there. There's physicians that are kind of saying, I can't share this data, right? Or payers that are saying, I can't share this data with another payer, despite it being in the rules. And so, you know, just a discussion about the risk around that and the education. So then we dove into, you know, what Daniel shared, and I think most of you are probably familiar with this content, but, you know, really just pulled from the slides that we had done on our webinar, when was it, Daniel? I think in December, where we shared kind of the results of the of the scan. Daniel was able to go through that. Of course, thank the participants of all the folks that were involved. I love this slide. And, Karen DeSalvo was actually one of the co-chairs, although she wasn't on site, but she was one of the co-chairs for the Health Data Palooza event. So I thought this was very appropriate that we had pulled her quote about being able to, make sure that we're looking at the complexity of the data. Daniel talked about the basis for the consent scan. We pulled in the Bronx information into that as well, kind of what, the learning from that, and then dove into kind of the promising practices, which again, I'm kind of buzzing through this quickly because I know Mary has to go, but this was part of the scan as well, and then talked about the utility. And then Mary was able to dive into the interop community, what they're doing to kind of support of all of this through MELD, having this open source information, being able to bring that LEAP grant code into the MELD community, and just how, we're approaching this from, okay, we're talking about all this stuff. Now we also have a group that's, that can support this through data, through a sandbox, through a testing, having that code base, being able to test everything. So where I want to land on this, and then I kind of closed it out before we got into actual panel discussion of just, there's a lot of stuff happening out there, right, in all these different areas. So how do we kind of get a group together to start thinking about it? And what does that mean, right? I mean, we're not building standards necessarily. What we want to be talking about are the models, right? The frameworks, how we need to be thinking about e-consent. And I thought Mary brought up a really good example of the example of a veteran in an advanced care directive situation where they may have done an advanced directive, but if they were getting care at any organization outside of the VA, you may not be able to access it, right? And so it's those types of things that we're trying to uncover in different situations. So I want to pause on this slide because I think this is where we probably want to have some of the discussion is, as we, as point of care partners have been, involved here with Project Unify, with the scan, with some work that Mary's been doing, and just as we're getting out there and talking to more folks about this, I think there needs to be kind of this discussion around use cases because, as we start thinking also about the ONC workshop, I think it's hard, right? I think a lot of the discussion was very kind of broad, but how do we now kind of say, okay, let's take a specific use case and let's think about consent in that use case. And so, the ones that we've been kind of getting some traction around is, of course, advanced care planning, which, BPM Plus, I know Jim St. Clair, Mary, others have been kind of involved with that. I'm hoping that we get that demo, get locked in for you guys to be able to do the demo and the thing that you guys did at HIMSS. Of course, all the Project Unify work, we've been talking about that. But I think there's two other use cases. The maternal and infant health is another one. And we talked a little bit about that at the panel discussion of, a mother gives birth to the infant. That infant doesn't necessarily have an identity. How do you do e-consent? How do you capture that? What's the model going to look like? What are the restrictions, the barriers, the things we need to be thinking about? And then Daniel had brought up a fourth one that we kind of included in this as well. This early medical intervention and education, if it's a child with disability, there has to be, a lot of talk of consent around that. So that's kind of in general what we actually presented. And then we kind of opened up the floor, and I was able to pepper Daniel and Mary with lots of questions. So I'm going to pause there. Mary, Daniel, anything to add to this?
Yeah, I put one comment in the chat. Stefan earlier mentioned the outcome of the ONC LEAP grant from San Diego that pulled together that consent data service. So that's now operational on the MELD sandbox. The team is working on enhancing the UI UX components of that. So for this community, that's freely available and a useful Smart on Fire app to go in and to be able to enable the work of this community as well.
Great, thanks, Mary. Daniel, anything from your perspective?
Yeah, no, I think great recap of that. It was a kind of a, we're getting used to doing this. So it's kind of how do we deliver information and fairly succinctly with enough detail without sort of drowning people. You know, I think a couple of things. One is, you know, as we have more of these conversations and we kind of move down the road further, you know, being able to actually do the work in, you know, with you guys and with Meld and actually have the data and the servers and all that stuff in place is really a real advantage. I guess there's two questions I want to sort of pursue. One is, you know, how, you know, from my limited understanding from the San Diego work, you know, the Leap CDS gets us to, you know, kind of to the front door, right? But it doesn't really bring us into other areas of sharing, whether or not it's social services or education or justice or things like that. And I'm curious whether or not you thought more about that, Mary, or anyone, and how do we think about being able to extend that out in that particular, because it's, you know, we think that's a pretty developed use case there in technology.
Yeah, so I think a lot of the good thinking around that is the team that provided a vignette of advanced care plans at the HIMSS Interoperability Showcase. So that brought in some of the new emerging technology models like AD Vault, providing software as a service. That model is not one that the EHR vendors are necessarily embracing at this moment in time in the marketplace. Looking at some of the platform components, both in the sandbox and what companies like HealthFlow provide, and our health IT platforms are becoming very robust, very cloud-based, embedding some of those common technology services around services like doing authentication and authorizations, et cetera. So I think that's where a lot of the depth and breadth of thought, working with that team to actually stand up what the Project Unify community would define as a proof of concept, the HIMSS community would define as a vignette at the Interoperability Showcase. The other one that I think putting a lot, just starting to put thought into is another vignette at that venue was focused around human trafficking. And I think a very powerful mechanism that both of those brought was complementing the use case with the business process models using standard syntax from the OMG BPM Plus group. Just brought very powerful tools to be able to define the activity and how this process is important. Too often the use cases kind of jump into the middle of the data model and you don't really get that full context of moving from data to process to knowledge, getting the knowledge to the right folks at the right time in the right syntax.
You know, you mentioned also the use case that's now just percolating up in terms of the early intervention education. And Christine, you may want to weigh in here a little bit. I know that actually emerged onto the scene in our conversations with New York Department of Health and the Inc. group as a very poignant and pertinent, sort of real valuable use case. And I think the response has been really powerful everywhere, and it addresses a bunch of stuff. So we didn't say much about it, but Christine, Paul, do you want to say a bit more about that as we sort of look at this?
Sure. So, I mean, I think what's useful about that particular use case is that it's one that makes a lot of sense, both to people who are really truly only focused in healthcare, in that there is literally healthcare going on outside of the healthcare domain. And it's very confusing to to healthcare providers who are also interacting with these same children, and in some states being asked to sign off on orders for therapies that those kids are receiving when they know nothing about what's happening in that part of the world, because it's a Department of Education program. On the other hand, it also has that great appeal to people in education and early childhood, public health, all the maternal child health domains. And so I think it has very, very broad appeal and applicability, and that everyone understands that, either when you have a child who's obviously born with some sort of condition or disability, or when you have that child where you're just not sure and you really want to intervene early and try to figure out what's going on and try to provide those appropriate therapies so to prevent long-term disability. Again, that has a lot of broad appeal, and yet right now they just operate on different planets. So that's really what we're looking at there.
That's
And,
really
and I'll
helpful.
quickly say that I'm sure it's organized differently all over the place, because some of it's in health, some of it's in education. So, one concept will have a lot of permutations. And the other issue, and Christine, I don't know if you did this, I just went and looked at the quality improvement or the data, and a third of the kids, after age 3 still have unresolved issues. And so this is going to last for a long time.
And then there's a handoff then into the pre-K system and the children and youth with special healthcare needs systems, which is, so then you've got, again, continuing education funding for one, and then you have Title V of the Social Security Act, which comes through the Maternal Child Health Bureau, which is part of HRSA, part of the US Public Health Service, again, not part of the medical care system. For that handoff that should be occurring if it hadn't already. So
it's really totally longitudinal. It could be lifelong.
Absolutely right. And then that goes into adult disability issues. There's a huge focus on transition to adulthood. So yeah, there's tons and tons of issues there that carry on throughout the lifespan.
That's a great use case. And, I'm thinking back, Mary, when we did the advanced directive one, right? I mean, basically what we did is we took someone through a journey, right? And like what, who were they touching? Where are they touching? Where's the, the handoffs? I mean, it's really just kind of mapping that out, right? And saying, where's it going to overlap and where do we have to be thinking about consent? And so that's why, I feel like, and Daniel, to your point, right? We're starting to kind of hone our message, but I also think, kind of pulling together, we keep kind of talking about this community of practice, right? But, kind of honing in on 1 or 2 use cases where we can start to map that out, right? And show people, okay, here's what we're talking about. Now let's think about some of those issues. And I think, hopefully we get to that point, right? And then in the next few months as we start thinking more and more about this, because it really is. And, of course, within the healthcare domain, right, we're thinking about it within like TEFCA and the HIE sharing data and all of that. But then when you go beyond that, which is kind of a lot of the focus here, it gets even more complicated. So, and I think, we started out the session by saying, we're not solving this. What we want to do is raise the issues, right? Of there's all this stuff, kind of data that being shared now and all this stuff happening. How do we, take 1 or 2 use cases, start mapping it out, start thinking about it, because then I think that'll also uncover kind of more broader issues that could be applied, in other use cases as well. So just something to be thinking about for this group.
Yeah, Pusha, thank you for raising that patient journey and being able to articulate the different steps in the process, being able to then put that into a standard syntax and really stand up the proof of concept with common tools that are available to the industry really quickly was a super powerful activity to just see how a computable object that could be embedded into any software system it was like a half day from the work of the patient journey, because it was so well articulated to be able to apply some of the technical tools to be able to stand up a working proof of concept that was,
Yeah.
for me, was really powerful, because I like got back to the team later that afternoon. I'm like, how's it going? Oh, we're done. I'm like, what do you mean you're done? This is supposed to take you 4
Yeah.
weeks.
Helpful.
So
Good.
I unfortunately need to leave. If I can bounce back after this call, I'll see if folks are still on, but
Great.
thank
Yeah.
you, Pooja and Daniel. Really
Quick question.
enjoyed presenting with you at the Health Academy.
Yeah, that was great. So next week, are we, have you been able to confirm the entourage to be able to bring?
Yeah.
You think
For
that's
the
gonna happen?
HIMSS Advanced Care Directive, that team's been in communication. All of the components of that, which involves like 7 different entities, have come together, save one, via email. We just need to do a planning cycle. Unfortunately, they're all really busy people, so we're a little bit challenged just to be able to have a conversation and sort of address rehearsal to make sure that all the component pieces work. But I believe that we'll be able to get that together, and we'll love to talk to folks next Wednesday and provide a demonstration of that vignette. I'll let you know, Daniel, if for some reason that falls away. Thank you all.
Thanks.
Bye-bye.
Yeah, I was at HIMSS, I saw it, and I was duly impressed with the synergy there that was happening. And it seemed like it would be something really worthwhile to look at that as relative to the business processes and the technology and the flows and information, the consents there, for us to be able to model off of that. And hopefully be able to do that within MELD.
Yeah,
Makes sense.
exactly. And I did put, I just realized I put the link to just our general presentations page. It should be the very first deck that is on that page. So
Okay.
If anyone wants to take a look, so.
That sounds great. So that's, you know, it's growing. What I'm really liking about the early intervention education one is it really sort of naturally brings in education and healthcare, right?
Yeah.
Without having to sort of reach over the fence and like wave your arm. It's like part of it, right? So I think also having the medical part in the work that we're doing connected to education and other areas is going to be really powerful. I think it'll be attractive for those systems that are very healthcare focused as well, because it will be a common territory, right? It won't be. But sometimes my experience is when we come from education or social services or justice, healthcare just doesn't have a place for it. You know, there's no cognitive sort of location for where to put that. Conceptually, that people get it, but they don't really see where it goes. And here it seems to maybe be a really a good close fit there. So we'll see if that proves out to be true, and maybe be able to use some of the the business process modeling tools. I thought those were amazing. Just what I was able to sort of glimpse at the show, just to be able to show that flow and the dynamic nature of the information as it's moving along there. So through the work that Marianne Meld has done, I think there could be real benefit to what we're trying to accomplish here, hopefully in the very near term. So just a couple other quick things here. One is, as I said, we have a call coming up on Friday with our Data Funders Collaborative, which has been in the offing now for months and months and months. So we'll have a chance to sort of share what we're learning and sort of describe the opportunity, the organization, and the collaboration, and all the participants. And a lot of the slides we showed earlier, Pooja went through quickly, we'll be demonstrating. But ideally, this is an opportunity for us to really bring in philanthropy at a significant level to be able to really support this work going forward in multiple sites. And just a little bit of good news that we heard this morning. Christina and I were on a call with the CDC Foundation, and after being introduced to them by Monica Lupi from the Kresge Foundation, who's now the managing director there, she put us in touch with them, and the response was outstanding. It was so excited. Totally made sense with what they're doing. And we learned a lot more about the CDC Foundation in terms of they actually have a little broader palette than what we originally thought. So they actually are operating both to support the CDC and then in related activities. They're doing a lot of interesting stuff. And I might say that one of the few times in my experience that the leadership, the president, CEO said, you know what, make sure you talk when you talk on Friday, make sure you let them know that the CDC Foundation is interested in this work. And we're gonna go look for some federal dollars to see if we can do a public-private. So that was, you don't hear that ever, but certainly not often. So Christine and I were like, oh my God,
That's great.
it was a great call. It was really interesting. And all the work that CDC is now doing with ONC on the data modernization, even the little glimpse, I don't know, Stefan, I don't know if you're still with us here or not, but we talked a little bit about that and what we heard at HIMSS and kind of the efforts to really address all these issues seems to be really in sync with that whole larger data modernization initiative. And Pooja, you may be closer to that just from the POCP's work.
Yeah, I mean, we're primarily just kind of up for the Helios stuff, right, and what they're doing there. But yeah, and actually even NCPDP some stuff with CDC. So yeah.
Oh, really? Okay,
Yeah.
well, that's good to know.
Yeah.
That's good.
Yeah, we're waiting
I
on
didn't realize that
Helios
was
to
something.
get cranking.
Yeah, I know. I think they finally got the use cases right from what I saw, but I don't know.
Yeah, our use case discussion's 2 months old now.
Yeah. I was just on there today because they're doing some stuff with immunizations, and NCPDP is as well. So that's why it kind of caught my eye. But yeah, I think there's a couple of things coming down the pike.
So who's actually leading that charge? Do you know offhand on the Helios? Because Helios is kind of the accelerator for.
Accelerator, yeah.
Right?
Jim, do you know it's a bunch of CDC people? I
is
didn't
it?
recognize their name.
Yeah, great question, Pooja. And I'd have to go back and dig through my email because I reached out to the if you're interested, contact us link about, well, a couple months ago and got a response. I'm signed up on the Confluence page, was poking around on Zulip today, but I forgot who is there. I think it's a company effort that's leading it, but yeah, there's a bunch of CDC people that are involved in it too.
Yeah,
So.
yeah, that's what I saw. So yeah, we haven't, I'll check with Jocelyn actually. I haven't had a chance to kind of chat with her about it. She probably knows as well.
I'm just thinking it might be a great opportunity, as things evolve over the next week or so, to maybe invite them to talk, at least kind of where they're headed, what they're thinking, and sort of make those connections early on, right, as they're doing that work, and see if we can form some of those linkages with, especially if this actually moves forward in some meaningful way. I think that would be interesting and enlightening for the work we're trying to do. So can see where that leads us to. So that's kind of what our programming is today. I don't know if there's other topics, thoughts, questions, recommendations that people are focused on. I know, Brian, before you got on, Courtney was extolling a little bit of your presentation at AAA there. I was, again, excited about yet a whole nother area, a whole nother population that is really resonating with the same topics. And how do we, sort of continue to bring them into this conversation as we move forward?
Was there, and I don't know what you said since I wasn't here. I thought my ears were burning, but I just figured, it was springtime. Did you want me to, show the major different slide that I put up?
If we have a moment, if you want to pull it out, that would be great, because I think that there's
Sure. Hang
area
on just a second.
Right. And Brian, I was talking about the fact that I think that you've captured their attention and helped speak to the need for them to understand these spaces and how these spaces impact them and how they impact the process, really.
Indeed. The presentation that I did covered, hang on, I'm busy trying to, there we go. covered the following concepts. And I'm literally pulling up my notes from that presentation. One was the notion that we have been discussing amongst a few of us, between the Gravity TAC, the Gravity Strategic Advisory Council, the Executive Committee, et cetera. The notion that, ever since when we started off with Gravity, the referral model we had was a referral from the clinical side to the social side, from healthcare providers to social care providers. And so this particular picture had a doctor, a nurse practitioner, social worker at a healthcare facility above screening and assessment, providing the assessment and providing the diagnosis and determining what goals and making a referral for an intervention. And somewhere fairly low in the process were the social care agencies, the CBOs, that would actually deliver on the solution to food insecurity or housing insecurity or transportation, et cetera. And that worked great until about this time last year, when we dramatically increased the size of the TAC, invited in a whole bunch of community human services and social services agencies, and sharps referral platforms like Unite Us and Aunt Bertha. And it became clear that, well, the social care practitioners felt that their responsibility was much further up in this process. Matter of fact, they have specialty assessments that they provide for their particular kinds of populations. They do their own diagnosis, which is often much broader based than what the healthcare practitioners might do. They have specialist knowledge about, well, which programs are funded right now? Which ones have run out of funding? Which ones happen to be real jerks about providing their services, and which ones are the best people on earth to send a client to? So there was this feeling that maybe this what had been the traditional Gravity referral process, assessment, diagnosis, goals, and interventions model, wasn't really fitting in with the way the social care world thought of their jobs. So we had some discussions amongst about a half a dozen of us now, scattered throughout the different aspects of Gravity, and about, well, how do we fix the model? We don't want to change the process involved, because the process is still going to be screening, assessment, diagnosis, goal setting, interventions, et cetera, outcomes perhaps. But instead we want to put make an extended care team be the center of the process, rather than having healthcare practitioners at the top, social care practitioners somewhere around the bottom. No mention of caregivers, no mention of patient, unless we say it's a patient-centered thing and 6 patients in the middle. So we came up with this notion of an extended care team that is comprised of healthcare practitioners, social care practitioners, the patient themselves, caregivers, all of whom can play a role in this SDOH model. And depending upon the specific needs and the specific circumstances of the referral, it could be that we still have the traditional Gravity clinical care practitioner making a referral to an CBO, but it could just as well be a area agency for the aging, which have social workers, case managers, et cetera, on board, specializing in the complex complex care needs of the elderly, that they may be starting off the referral process rather than the healthcare practitioner. In fact, they may be making referrals to healthcare practitioners, saying, I've got a client here who hasn't seen a doctor in 10 years, and they're in dire need of a proper healthcare assessment, diagnosis, goal setting, et cetera, et cetera. It could be that the caregiver is showing up at a 211 saying, I'm looking for some food services for the child that I'm taking care of. I'm a parent, caregiver. Where can I find this kind of service? Well, that fits into the same model. And of course, the patient themselves may be coming forward and saying, you know, I need a doctor. Let me look up in the system what doctors are available and taking new clients and get a referral to that doctor through whatever referral platform they happen to be going through. So this reframing of the model, it is exactly the same model, except we have brought the healthcare practitioners, the social care practitioners, and of course the patients and their caregivers together at the center of it. And in so doing, we have, in essence, elevated the social care practitioners to yet another, becoming yet another specialist, just like cardiologists and oncologists and podiatrists. They just happen to be specialists in social care services. And as a consequence, referrals get made to them for further assessment, diagnosis, goal setting, and interventions to solve the particular problems that they have. And by the way, just to touch on something that, because I heard this the last time I made this pitch, and Dr. McCoy was there, and she rightly said, so I wanted to make sure she knows I was listening, that sometimes you don't have a social care practitioner, social care specialist you can do that referral to. And she's absolutely right. Sometimes the doctor has to, or the nurse or whomever has to roll up their sleeves and take care of that referral themselves. But it's not unlike my situation where I've got a primary care physician who wants to be able to refer me to a dermatologist, but we only have one dermatologist in the county. How, I don't know, but we only have one. They're not taking any more patients. The next closest one is a half an hour away. They're taking new patients, but not until August of 2023. So my poor family care practitioner has got to turn around and take care of my little dermatology problem all by her lonesome. And that's just the way it rolls sometimes.
And Brian, I would say that that's the rule, and the exception is that you have somebody internally to refer to. But I thought you had said something about a before and an after slide, or like a contrasting slide. So I was waiting for you to come up with that alternative slide here. But are you, I mean, if we could just,
this is the alternative.
This is the alternative slide. Okay, I mean, it would be truly alternative if we could get rid of Loink and SNOMED and all this stuff that's tied into the healthcare reimbursement system, right? That nobody else cares about. But okay, so this is the alternative because it's a circle and everybody is in the circle and it doesn't matter where you start.
People into the.
Yeah. No, I think that's great.
We haven't created a different process. So we're not going to break anybody's idea of how the process should work. We're not going to break the massive master spreadsheets we have of various codes and things like that. We're just saying, let's rethink the how and why we follow this process. And in so doing, get a little more respect as well for the social care practitioners. When they're just another specialist, like a cardiologist, oncologist, et cetera, they get a bit more respect in terms of, here's what is going on in my area of specialty. Please listen. Don't just, exclude us because we're not healthcare. We don't understand. And that's a critical thing because we've seen at least twice now within the Gravity community process. Specialists in the homeless and specialists in aging step up and say, no, you've got your codes wrong. You need to do X, Y, and Z. Well, you're not healthcare. Doesn't matter. And that's just the wrong way to approach this. So rather mischievously, let's make social care part of healthcare. It's just another specialty that needs to be respected, just like we respect cardiologists and urologists. Now, I finally got neurology out. I've closed the loop on Oh, I never gave the example in this particular. Sorry, my standard example is if a patient shows up at a family care practitioner with a backache and blood in the urine, the family care practitioner would very, 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 like obscenely rarely up in the northern woods of Alaska say, oh, well, I'm going to diagnose you with a kidney stone and refer you for lithotripsy. No, they're going to say, I observe that you have, I've given an exam. I observe that, yes, your back is tender right where the kidneys are, and you've got blood in your urine. I've tested it. Now I'm going to refer you to a urologist for further assessment, diagnosis, care planning, interventions with whatever intervention that particular specialist in urology feels needs to be done for you, the patient. And we need to think of social care as being handled exactly the same way. You may do an assessment in your doctor's office, may do an assessment to determine, hey, you appear to have malnutrition. You're claiming to have food security because we gave you the career. Now let's refer you to a social care specialist to really dive deeper into what is it exactly you need in order to get you back on the straight and narrow. Do you need transportation because you're hungry because you just can't get to the closest grocery store? Or do you need SNAP benefits because you can't afford the food? Or do we need to send you back to the dietitian at the healthcare provider? There's a referral from social care back to healthcare in order to get you the appropriate nutritional counseling so that you'll eat right and not just live on Twinkies.
That's great.
But Brian, I could really push back on many things here. And in particular, I think you already know, but I mean, I think we need to move the money from medical care into social care. I mean, all the other countries that do well spend $2 on social care and $1 on medical care. And, just trying to subsume social care under as a medical specialty is, not radical enough for me.
Yeah.
Well,
I was having the
that
same reaction,
revolution-
which is why I like the circle, that it's not about medical care. Like, that's why I'd like to sort of erase that whole piece, right? Like that medical care centric view of the world. Because that's why I like that they're in a circle. Like, this could start anywhere. The caregiver could be the person who's asking for help, right? Or that social care practitioner, anybody, the person themselves. And then realizing that they're all interconnected and interdependent, and that the information needs to flow as appropriate between them.
We need to
Paul,
be
if
free of,
Paul-
we need to get free of HL7 though, or it's not going to flow to the social care. And I think that's the piece that's going to be tricky if we want to see any kind of change in the next 10 years. But it can be done. It can absolutely be done. And I think it'll actually give us a higher data quality than the standards that we're trying to develop.
How can it be done, Mary, sir?
Yeah.
How can it be done? Because we're not talking about dumping whole systems in like we do with healthcare. We're talking about only needing very discrete pieces of data from each of the social service or human service systems. So for child welfare, you're going to have your maybe 20 data elements, maybe just 10 that are really important. From SNAP, you're only going to have a handful of data elements. When you start taking it down to that, every SNAP system, although every single one is different, has those 10 data elements. So there are conventions that we have in human services that we can leverage. There are things that we know about these systems and these data, if for no other reason, because federal reporting requires it, right? So using those conventions and then utilizing ML, we can actually know that data. We just have to do it intentionally. If you want to dump it all into a data warehouse, that's another story. That's going to become really complicated. But if you just want to be able to exchange the data that clinicians need, they don't want everything. They just want the 2 data elements that are going to help me.
So this is Courtney Baldridge from US Aging. And one, I love this conversation. Two, Paul, I'll agree with you all day long that social services should have more funding so that we can intervene at a more appropriate time and hopefully head off a lot of the building healthcare risks that we could otherwise avert. I want to tell you all two stories that probably illustrate why Brian's rethought model makes a tremendous amount of sense. One is a woman named Ethel that was in Tampa, Florida. Ethel lived in a house that was in utter disrepair. She had cats that were feral. Ethel had no caregivers. She had no family left. And Ethel was a client of a very small nonprofit that provided services. Ethel contracted scabies. None of the community service providers had her as a client other than this nonprofit, and they wouldn't go in and serve her because now she had a highly contagious and communicable disease. And Ethel, if you called her, said she was fine. Ethel didn't go to the doctor, so there was no one that would assess her in a healthcare setting. But Ethel was a mess on so many levels. And it was a volunteer driver that encountered Ethel and was able to call us and say, Ethel's got a lot of problems and needs help. And we were able to assess her and get her a lot of services and supports. Ethel's an extreme case, but she is complex care on every level possible. And complex care cannot be managed inside of a standardized technology referral platform environment. And then there's someone by the name of Dr. Harold Freeman. If you all don't know of him, he's worth looking up. Dr. Harold Freeman is an oncologist out of Harlem who back in the 1970s was diagnosing women with breast cancer like crazy. They were at risk. These were women that needed support and help. He would diagnose them and he kept wondering where the heck they were going because they'd go away. They wouldn't come back for treatment. These are women that have been diagnosed for breast cancer. So he started to think, well, maybe they found another provider they like more. Maybe something else is going on with them, but he was worried about their care. So he finally got mad. So he decided to organize, a family member or two and a volunteer or two and said, go find my patients and make sure they're getting care somewhere. You know what he found out? One of them didn't have the money for the bus ride. The other one was caring for their grandchild, and because the daughter was working 3 jobs and the daughter couldn't take off work. So the grandmother didn't have time to get back to the doctor. Problems, really, some real life problems. These things sometimes could be picked up on an assessment, at least an assessment now. But there's one that stuck out to me that was so incredibly disturbing and made me so profoundly sad. And that is, he had one patient that didn't come back because they didn't know how to operate the parking ticket machine. Yeah. They didn't return to get their breast cancer treated because they didn't know how to manage that moment in the parking garage, and they didn't know how to overcome it by themselves. And there is no standardized assessment in the world that's going to help you learn that. And this is where social workers come in. And this is where social experts come in. And this is why I love Brian's model. Thank you, Brian.
Well, on that.
It takes all of these dimensions in order to really bring the story forward, right? Both the solution, but the stories and the solution and the visual and all of that are very important, to try to do this. And then the competence of the data kind of conceptualization. And I think even questions like Mary Sarah's HL7 stuff, that these are some of the issues. I think that that's really one of the hallmarks of what this group can do.
Montefiore has this service called What Matters to You. So instead of patients coming in and asking them what's the matter, you ask them what matters to you. And it can be anything that the person wants, right? They just write it down on a little note. And that's the wonderful thing. That little note, it could be, I can't handle the parking meter.
Look, they do this in the exam room, so that doesn't really happen that way. But yes, I know it. You're right.
I just want to share that little tidbit.
Yeah. I mean, we're working on that. And we're working on, relationships, right? I mean, eventually all of these things are the relationship between the patient and the system and people within the system.
Right.
I mean, in our system, I always say that it's the receptionist at the front desk who's the most important person. I mean, they like the doctor, but if they can't operate the system at the front end.
Well, and I think it's
falls apart.
how are you able to gather this information at top of license? The last thing that the system can afford is to have the heart surgeon being the one to have the half-an-hour conversation to find out there's a problem with the parking meter.
Right.
So that's the other thing that I think we need to rethink as we look at Brian's model. If you're trying to shove these assessments towards clinical, you now have folks that are not at type of license trying to do work that's highly personal and really isn't about a person's home, rather than a conversation that should be more about how your heart works and why you need surgery. So I think that's the other dynamic to this is marrying up the licensure level, the work that's important, and the capacity to do these deep assessments.
Well, we're working on that as well. I mean, could share with you guys that, I was flabbergasted. I just saw a grand rounds by a cardiothoracic surgeon on social determinants of health. I mean, it's penetrated everywhere. Everybody's very aware of this, right? I mean, they don't want to, I'll just tell you, the number one reasons people don't get kidney transplants. What is it, Christine? They don't have anybody to take care of them when they leave, when they post-op. And so they're going to fail, right?
Right. Whereas the bus will pick them up and take them to dialysis back and forth whenever they need it.
It has nothing to do with their biology or the surgeon's skill set. Anyhow.
All right, friends, this has
Bye.
been another wonderful conversation. I look forward to checking in with y'all next week, and hopefully we'll have some great news, and we'll continue the conversation.
Good.
Thank you, guys.
Christine, a quick question. Do you have time tomorrow morning for a quick call?
Tomorrow morning, I think so. Before 10, I do. Yeah.
All right. I'll send you a Zoom because we need to connect on this early intervention stuff. There